Alright, welcome back to another video. So in today's video, I'm going to be installing a water treatment system in my house. So this video might interest you if you're in a similar situation to me. We have well water, obviously, and we have kind of a unique condition with our water. It's actually tested as very soft naturally, but has a higher pH level, but is corrosive to our appliances. So I'll give you an example. We don't have a lot of like iron deposits or anything like that. If you test our water for hardness, it tests extremely low, almost no hardness. And yet we still have problems with mineral deposits on our faucets. So a year ago, we remodeled our bathroom, and there's already pitting taking place on the faucets. You'll notice even on pipes, you'll see corrosion. It's that green gunk on your copper plumbing. So what I'm going to be doing to kind of solve the situation or solve my problem is kind of a big upgrade. A conventional water softener, as I said, really does not do me a whole lot of good. And what we're talking about is, you have carbonate hardness and you have non-carbonate hardness. Without making this video all about chemistry, we'll just say that the type of hardness that's in my water is not something that can be treated with a conventional water softening system. One of the ways to treat the non-carbonate hardness in my water is to, use a type of solution like soda ash, inject it, and now we're getting into, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, constant maintenance, just to correct what I would consider a minor issue. Our water quality is generally good, except for how it treats, our pipes and our appliances. So what I have now is a kind of a traditional system. Water comes in from the well through that pipe there. I do have a cycle stop system installed. And what this does is once your water is running, your well is running, it slows the pressure down to where basically the well pump, if you're taking a shower, will run at a lower pressure the entire time. And it keeps the pump from cycling on and off. And a lot of modern systems do this with electronics, and this is a much simpler setup. Using the cycle stop valve, it allows it to be a mechanical system where it basically just holds the pressure back on the pump, and without it cycling on and off all the time, it actually prolongs the life of the well pump. And we have it go into a standard, pressure tank here. And there's our pressure switch, which turns the well pump on and off. We've got a couple, water takeoffs here. Our shutoff valve comes over here, comes in through here, and it goes through two filters. You can bypass the filters. This is an anti-drain back valve just to make changing the filters easier. And then it goes up and, to our hot water system and the rest of the house through copper plumbing. So I'm going to be using these the A.O. Smith system basically, in combination with a very large pre-filter and a large post-filter. And in addition, the icing on the cake, which is probably not necessary, but if I'm going to do it, I'm just going to go all out and do it right. I have a UV filtration system whole house UV filtration system that we'll be installing also. So basically how it'll work, we'll get rid of this setup here. The water will come from our tank, the well pump, and it will enter our first large 10-inch filter here. And basically what that composed of is a large string filter, and it filters down to 5 microns fine sediment. It's It's got a flow rate of 8 gallons per minute, which is plenty. So once the water goes through this filter, which will keep scale and sediment out of our whole house water filter system. So this is the first tank with our A.O. Smith system. And this is a 6-year or 600,000 gallon. There's no way to flush it. Just after 6 years or 600,000 gallons, which is the warranty, you have to replace it. And I got these on sale on Prime Day on Amazon. They're normally around $300 a piece for these 2 separate filters. And I ended up getting them for a little over $200, so I'm glad I waited. So, you know, in 6 years, 7 years from now, we'll have to replace these. So it goes into the whole house water filter, filters the water, then it goes into the whole house descaler. And this is the important piece right here. So basically how a descaler works, some people call them salt-free water softeners. That's a little misleading to call them a water softener, where a traditional water softener would use sodium to bind to, you know, your different hardness properties of your water, like magnesium, calcium, whatever. This uses a substrate, a material in the tank, and it kind of accomplishes the same thing. Basically, the ions in that tank attach to your mineral particles, and it does not allow them to attach to like your appliances. So basically they stay suspended and they go down the drain. So if you have really hard water, this may not be the system for you if you want to have that, you know, that soft water feeling. You know, I personally don't like that real soapy, soft water feeling. And again, like I said, our water is not a traditionally hard water at our house. We're kind of tackling a unique water condition that we have here with this. So this will just filter out all the sediment and, you know, any other harmful stuff. This will take the minerals out of the water or prevent them from damaging our appliances. And then after it runs through both of those, we're going to go through another filter like this. And basically this is a carbon block filter here, which again, possibly overkill, but we're going to go for it. And then finally, after it goes through there, it will go through the UV filter. So if there's any bacteria or mold or anything else that's managed to make it through this system, which we do not have any bacteria in our water, but you never know, it will be killed by the UV filtration system on its way to the rest of the house. So stick with me here and I'll show you exactly how I'm going to be doing this. I'm going to be retrofitting all these parts in with mostly PEX. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do, once I've got everything figured out here, kind of where I want to put everything, is we've got to come up with a plan for how we want to route this and what we want to do. So plumbing fixtures are very expensive, especially valves. There's nothing wrong with the setup I have here. This little mini loop, I'm going to take advantage of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it off here eventually, you know, when we go to tie it in. This will be the inlet to our system. We'll come down here to our first pre-filter. It will come in the side of the filter. It will go through the filter this way. It will come out, and then it will come down into our water filter. Then our descaler, come out. We'll go into our second filter. We'll go this way, and then we'll go into our last filter, or I mean our UV system before being sent back up into our water supply right here. So that way we can bypass it if necessary and shut it down. Now, how I kind of designed the system is I just took a picture and then drew a really rough sketch on the picture of basically how I wanted to do it, because you have to consider all the different bends and tees that you're going to need before you start ordering your parts. So while I'm waiting for some parts to come in that I've ordered because going to the box stores is just going to cost way too much money for this. I am going to be using, like I said, PEX A. I'm going to be using the expandable fittings. Alright, so the first thing, we're going to mount a board right here, kind of like the one we have up here, she talked about. So, only problem is our well pump control is kind of in the way of spanning these 3 boards. I'm going to go across as far as I can, about 46 inches. Alright, next step is to start assembling your filters. So it came with these 4 screws to go into the plastic. I took obviously the clear part off. You need to pay attention to your arrows. So in this case, the arrows are showing that it goes through this way. So we're going to mount this about right here. And when we get it installed, we'll come and go through like that. Before I put that on, I'm going to wait until I get my bushings. That way I can install everything on here, off of here. That way I know it's good and there's no leaks. Alright, so before you can use these tanks, you have to flush them. And on the filter one, it says to flush it until there's no more carbon coming out. So it would be like little chunks of black stuff. And this one just says flush it for a specific amount of time. So we'll just, it says again on the Descaler here, it says, before installing inline, this filter must be flushed until no carbon fines are visible. See instructions. So obviously, we'll find our inlet and our outlet, which is marked on here. And then they give you this adapter here, which screws in and it connects to a garden hose. That way you can just flush these outside before you bring them down into the basement. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. That way we can start making our plumbing connections on these. Alright, so now I'm going to attach the hose to the Descaler here. It'll take a minute to fill up the tank. We'll just let it run for a minute. The other one had a lot of like carbon come out at first. All right, so now we've got everything. I went ahead and flushed these out until they ran clear. And we're ready to assemble these. So what I did is I bought these Schedule 80 fittings. Like I showed you before, they come with some valves. In my situation here, it's just pretty tight clearance. So I went ahead and got these Schedule 80 fittings. So how these work is, as you can see, unscrew this, and there's a Viton rubber seal there. So if I need to quickly disconnect these tanks for some reason, I can do that. So there's one here, there's one in the middle here, and then there's one here. And the important thing is the way I have these staggered, I'll be using PEX pipe, so I could, in theory, pull these tanks out and then reconnect the 2 PEX lines together in my loop and maintain the rest of the system. If, say, if one of these sprung a leak or anything like that, I wouldn't have to lose my whole water system. Obviously, we'll retain the ability to run in bypass. All we have to do is turn off this valve, open our bypass, and it'll bypass our whole water treatment system anyway. But it just gives us some options. Okay, you'll see that I went ahead and plugged in brass fitting on this side. I'm just using PTFE tape, obviously, for this. The type of fitting that I'll be using is PEX, but these are expansion fittings. So Uponor is a common brand name associated with this, but a lot of manufacturers, like even Sharkbite, Apollo, and others, are making fittings now for the expansion fitting. You do need a special tool. In my case, I've got this new DeWalt 20 volt because I have all of my other DeWalt tools. That way the batteries will interchange. Different manufacturers like Milwaukee make a similar thing. Comes with 3 different heads, your 1/2 inch, your 3/4, and your 1 inch. And this will be all we need for expansion fittings. There's a little bit of an upfront cost. That tool alone is $400. You can get the tool only if you already have the battery and charger for around $300 online, which will save you a little bit of money if you already have a setup of DeWalt batteries or Milwaukee or whoever else. You also can buy a manual tool, but I mean, unless you're doing like 1 or 2 fittings, you know, using that manual tool gets old pretty quick. So again, it's gonna be real simple. I'm gonna cut this off here. We're gonna have a 90. It's gonna come down. It's gonna go into our first large filter, which will be this filter right here. This is a Culligan brand, any large one. They're all similar. Has a built-in bypass on it, which I guess is exciting. And a shut off, not that we really need that. I went ahead and put these bushings in already. Again, using this PTFE tape. I'm using this Jayco, and it's a really thick, good tape. Instead of like the cheap crap, you know, you find everywhere. And so this reduces it. These have 1 inch threads, and I'm reducing them down to 3/4. Everything that I'm gonna be using is 3/4. So that will come in there. It will exit the pre-filter, come into our filtration. This is our water filter. Then go to our descaler. It will come up. It will go into our post filter this way, and it will come out over here, come up into our UV system here, go through our UV as our final treatment, and then it will come back into our bypass here. So I'm gonna cut this out, and it will go back up into our water system there. So hopefully that makes sense. So this is a check valve, and what that does is it prevents water from flowing this way, and only allows it to flow this way. Technically, you aren't really supposed to have a check valve like that on a system when you have a hot water heater, because it will not allow the water to push back as it expands. So I'm most likely going to be eliminating this check valve and just using a conventional shut-off valve like this. That way, if I need to turn off the loop, I can turn it off manually. This check valve, not really a good idea, but it's been here and everything's worked fine. The whole time the house has been here for the last 16 years. And then the final thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be replacing my hot water tank. This is from 2005. It's now 2021 when I'm shooting this video. So it still does work, but I can only imagine what the inside of it looks like with the condition of the water that we have here. There's no leaks. It does work. I really don't want to put all of our, you know, conditioned water through that, because then it's just going to pick up a bunch of minerals out that have been, you know, deposited over time. And the way this system works, the descaler, the way it charges the minerals, it will just be constantly working on cleaning up this water filter or this hot water heater. And it's just going to take forever. I mean, if ever. So I'm going to be working against myself. So I'm going to start fresh with a brand new hot water tank. It's time anyway. I mean, that thing's just a time bomb. Being 16 years old, I don't know the maintenance before I lived here on it, as far as if the A node has ever been changed. So we're going to start with a brand new one. Basically, it's just a direct replacement, 50-gallon electric. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is now I'm going to go ahead and shut my water system off. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to replace this supply line. As you can see, this is the main line that comes out of my tank and goes up, and it is awfully corroded, and I'm sure the inside of it is pretty heavily corroded. So I would like to have the maximum amount of pressure coming into our new system. Every one of these 90s reduces my pressure. So I'm going to use one solid piece of PEX pipe to come to about here. And how I'm going to do that is I'm going to use these turning blocks that actually form the PEX into 90-degree turns. That way we don't have to make any sharp bends. We'll have maximum water flow coming out of our pressure tank and into our system. so I'll let it expand. It says around 11 to 12 times. Push it in all the way. And then it will obviously shrink down on its own. It takes a little while. All right, so we've got our main line fitted here. See how that goes. Comes up to here. So it's important just to hold these until they're tight enough. And then I've got my top line done here. And you're saying, hey, why do you have a shark bite right here? So I didn't want to use any push connect fittings in this whole setup, but that's there for an important reason. I could have done a, PEX to copper transition and soldered it, no problem. But the reason I did this is that way, this allows the pipe to move. The shark bite allows it to move. So if I ever, for some reason, need to take this system out, I'll be able to unscrew and turn this, and it will turn right here and allow me to remove the UV filter. So we're gonna have something kind of similar on the other side. The reason I have copper coming out a foot is because the manufacturer of this system recommends that you have at least 12 to 18 inches of metal coming out before you transition into plastic line, just because these do get hot. All right, let me show the process of making a connection here. Measure, cut pipe. These fittings have built-in stops, so you just push them onto the pipe as far as they'll go. Just make sure your cut is very straight. All right. That is seated properly all the way around. I say hold it for a good 30 seconds and you'll feel it kind of grab a hold. Okay, so I just made my last connection, which was right here. So you can see, again, I'll just walk you through the diagram one more time. So we come in from our well, we go down, come up back here, and here's where we come in. Right now I do have the water to the house turned on and it's in a bypass mode. I'm still waiting for all this stuff to dry. So if I shut this off, it will force the water this way when this is open. We'll come into our first filter. You can see we have our string filter right here. Again, there'll be links to everything in the description below that I'm using. So we come into our sediment filter, which protects our system, protects our water filtration system. We come out here, and we go into our water filter. So obviously our water filter is first. Then we go into our descaler, then out of the descaler into the post filter. Basically, this just filters for taste or anything else that managed to make it through there. Minerals such, it comes out of there, goes up here, and comes into the inlet for our UV system. It runs down across the UV light, out of our UV system, and then again, when this is opened, it will flow up into the house. And it cannot go this way because this is turned off. So hopefully that makes sense. And then most of these manufacturers recommend at least 20 minutes on these fittings to let them compress for at least 20 minutes before you put any water pressure on them. All right, so now we can start turning stuff on and testing for leaks. So I've got this switch and the switch in the off position. What that does is that will limit the flow. So if I go ahead and shut this, turn this one on, so now we have water pressure to here, okay? So I can bypass the filter, which would just completely bypass it. So if you're ever troubleshooting a water flow problem and you don't know what filter is possibly causing a low pressure condition, you can put it in bypass mode, which will just let the water flow through. And if your water pressure picks up, you know it's that filter that's clogged. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and switch this back off for a second. And I'm going to put this from bypass to filter. Like that. So we're straight across. So you can see we've got some water falling in here. So now if I turn this back on, this is going to let water go into the filter, and it's going to come all the way through both of our tanks here. There's a little drip of water there, but it's not a leak. And it's going to allow it to come up to this filter. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on the water. Okay, so you can hear our tanks filling. All right, well, we're in good shape so far. There's no leaks. This was the area I was going to be worried about, all this plastic fittings. But so far, so good. And like I said, we have water to this point here. So I'm still within my 20-minute window, so I'm going to wait a few more minutes before I go ahead and turn this section on. So a couple things, other things about these Culligan things. This is a pressure bleed-off valve, so you can let air out of the system. You can see water will spray out. A lot of people complain that these are really hard to turn. So built into the handle of your filter wrench, that's meant to go on there. That's not going to work for me in my situation. But as you can see on this one, it does fit, and that allows you to get some more leverage. Also, obviously, the other side is meant to go in here and be used to take your filters on and off. All right, so there's the system. We've got everything running correctly. We've got these open. We're shut off here. We've got our UV system plugged in and working. Just give you a little peek at that. See, UV bulb is in, doing its thing. All right, so you're probably saying, that's great and all. So you've got the system installed. Want some actual results. Okay, so while this test is not going to show you the difference in the non-carbonate hardness, because that is a lab test, it has to be done, I can show you a quick test that will prove that the system solved at least one of my problems, okay? And my pH was always on here. It's always alkaline at an 8.0. pH was always in the 8 range every time I tested it, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and run a test. I'm gonna let the cold water run for a minute, get a good sample, and then we can do our test. All right, so here's our first sample. This is gonna be just the pH test by itself. So we'll go ahead and dip this in here. Get it out, we'll let it sit for a minute. So again, here we are at 60 seconds. See, we're right at about 7.5, and that is going from, we've moved down from a pH of 8 to almost 8.5 before. So just a little bit of results to go along with our testing. Obviously, everyone's water conditions are different. I was not really installing the system to treat hard water. That wasn't our issue. Our issue was that we had non-carbonate hardness. We had certain minerals in our water that were causing corrosion on faucets and eating metal surfaces. So my plan is to send a water analysis out to a lab to have a much more in-depth test done, which should be able to tell me exactly what's going on with the water. But I'm looking for good things. I can already just tell by the smell and the taste of the water that there's an improvement, and hopefully our moving on our pH scale here is an indication that something good was actually done with the water in the descaler. All right, so let's go ahead and wrap this up. So just remember, things to remember with this system. A water descaler does not work quite like a water softener. So if you have hard water in your home, how this system will work is it will actually charge the minerals in the water and form them to kind of bond together. And basically, by running through the descaler, it makes it so it charges the mineral particles, and the mineral particles will stay in the water instead of being deposited on your plumbing fixtures. So basically, they go right down the drain. So that's kind of how that system works versus a traditional water softener, which will actually, replace the minerals with a salt, and then you have a salty, soft water. So if you had really, really hard water that you were trying to, make soft, this probably wouldn't be the system for you. In my case, I don't like the feeling of that super soft, it feels like you always have soap on you and you can't get it off. I don't like the feeling of that. Our water was naturally pretty soft. We just had something called non-carbonate hardness that I was trying to tackle. So this is the solution to me. I enjoyed the quality of our water when we were taking showers. It was just wreaking havoc on our fixtures. So that is why I went with the system that we went with. So hopefully that makes sense to you. If it doesn't, and you have a question, you can leave it in the comment section below. I'll do my best to answer it. I'm not a chemist. I'm just a DIY type of person who's trying to tackle a specific issue. But this may be helpful to you. This system kind of covers a lot of different problems that you can have with your water, whether it's chlorine, taste, odor, or bacteria, the UV filter. There's a lot of different things that this system treats for. So we've pretty much got all of our bases covered here. So again, there'll be links to everything that I used in the description below. So if you want to purchase something, look down below in the description. You can find the link and you can purchase it from there. I really appreciate you watching, coming along on this little journey of making better water at our house. You can see I did get the water heater installed as well. All right, thanks for coming along. Until next time, we will see you later.